Hey, what's going on, everybody? We've got a special guest here. It's Jason Beede, covers UCF for the Orlando Sentinel, here to talk about Davonte Brown, newest Miami Hurricane. Jason, how's it going?
Pretty good. It's hectic, as you know. Just a couple days till early signing day. Transfer portals never stopping, and but things are going well.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time of year for fans, either hoping to improve their season from a year ago, this past season. Hope is just around the corner, right? With all these new acquisitions, I think Miami's hoping they got a cornerback here. Let's go through Devontae's kind of his career in particular. Let's start with this past season, though. 30 tackles, 2 interceptions, to 4 pass breakups, 6'2", good length at that spot. What'd you kind of make of this past season there for Davonte?
Yeah, I think it was kind of underwhelming, to be honest with you, based on how 2021 went for him. And that's not to say he didn't have a good season this year and didn't have some key pass breakups and whatnot. And maybe he didn't get the interception number that he was hoping to this season, but I just felt like based on the year he had last year, maybe he could have, developed a little bit better and had a special season where maybe he could have even declared early for the NFL draft. That was the year I thought maybe he was thinking he was going to have this year, and a lot of UCF fans thought he was going to have this year. I mean, he was on the Jim Thorpe Award watch list in the preseason, and I know a lot of players on that are on watch lists, but I think that was the type of season he was expecting to have, and for whatever reason, he didn't have the year I think he totally wanted. It's not to say he didn't have a bad season. I think one thing with Davonte is, he's not going to stow up in the stat sheet with like 100 tackles. Obviously, at that position, defensive back, especially for Davonte, they're not going to throw quarterbacks aren't going to throw Davonte's way. So that's where maybe just because he doesn't have as many pass breakups or as many as interceptions as he may have wanted, the ball's just not going his way. Now, with that being said, I felt like at times, he was a little too handsy on the field. I remembered, at least I was looking back at some old tweets multiple times saying that he had been flagged for pass interference. And I recall him getting blown by a couple times for, a couple touchdowns. But again, Davonte is a really talented cornerback. And I think Miami has something here where, like I said, he has that NFL potential, no doubt.
And just looking at those counting stats, maybe it is what you're speaking of again. So the year before, 2021, the 38 tackles, the 1 interception, but the 13 pass breakups certainly stand out. Multiple games with multiple pass breakups, using his length to his advantage there. Jason, and I know a lot goes into maybe the next season, especially at cornerback. Like you said, maybe they weren't getting a target as much or whatever it might have been. Is there something in particular that maybe does stand out to you in terms of this past season? Either expectation or, like I said, maybe not as targeted or whatever it might be. Is there something in particular that maybe you can pinpoint?
Yeah, I still think he had some critical pass breakups this season. A couple of them led to, I think there was a turnover late in the season. It was a pass breakup that Davonte had, and one of his teammates caught the interception. It was like a crowded play in the middle of the field, basically. So I still think, teams maybe you said, hey, look, we know about Davonte Brown over there on that side, and we're not going to throw his way unless we absolutely have to. And UCF had a couple other younger guys in that secondary. He was definitely one of the more experienced players that teams definitely knew about the year prior, or because of the year prior. So, I think he still had a solid season overall. And I think one thing that stands out to me about Davonte is, his character. I think he's a really good person, obviously off the field as well. I'm not sure if you've spoken with him before, but he's very soft spoken. And I like covering Davonte in my time that he was at UCF.
With his size speed kind of combination there, I'm curious if you could kind of break it down how you think he does guarding bigger receivers and then also maybe the smaller ones, because again, interesting spot being at that cornerback spot at that 6'1", 6'2" size.
Yeah, he was really on that island, obviously, like most corners are. I kind of felt like with Davonte, you know, it felt like to me, based on UCF's scheme and what they kind of did defensively this year, some fans like to point out the fact that, it would be third and short or whatever, and they'd be lined up, 5 or 6 yards away from the receiver. So maybe some of that was schematics and what they want to do. The secondary overall had a lot of experience. I kind of felt like Davonte definitely handled, some of the team's best wide receivers whenever they were, going against teams that love to pass the ball. Um, I think, with his size and his speed, um, he was definitely, I don't recall him going up against a ton of the shorter receivers. He was definitely more on some of the larger receivers for sure. And I think he did a good job of, like I said, the reason he didn't show up in the stat sheet a whole lot is because he didn't get the ball thrown his way a ton.
We're speaking so much on his coverage ability. Now, obviously, that's a big part for any defensive back, especially corner, especially if they're out there on the island. But maybe could you evaluate tackling ability at that spot? Obviously, cornerback, typically that's not their strength, but just your thoughts on him as a tackler. And I'm asking again, because Miami's looking, there's a lot of things that they want to get corrected from this past season, 5-7, defensively, not where it needed to be. So is that something that he's been able to help with, you think, or how would you kind of evaluate him as a tackler?
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily the strongest tackler. I don't know if whether it was because of bad angles or whatnot, but I remember one specific play, against Tulane in the conference championship where he just I think maybe it had to do with his bad angle, but he just couldn't get the hands. He tried to do a hand tackle as opposed to like a full fledged tackle. I just felt like Davonte probably wasn't going to be the guy getting that open field tackle. He's much more likely to get the interception or break up the pass as opposed to, he can chase some guys down. He's not the fastest guy, but I wouldn't consider him, tackling isn't his strong suit. Like you said, most cornerbacks, it's not necessarily what they're best at, as opposed to like safety or linebacker, where you're just going to rack up tackles in the open field. But I definitely recall him having, not the strongest tackling ability in the world this past year, at least.
So he arrives in 2020, three-star recruit, not highly regarded. I'm curious your thoughts on maybe what the staff thought they had in him when he arrived, and kind of 3 years into it, kind of where he's at as a player now. And you spoke about it. He was potentially, or at least on the watch list, or potentially being a draft guy after this year. Maybe where he can still go. His upside, he puts it all together, kind of combining these past 2 years in particular. Jason, your thoughts again on what they thought they had in him when he arrived, and then where he's at now, and also moving forward, kind of the totality of his career at this point.
Yeah, he was a recruit. He was recruited by Rainey Shannon and Corey Bell. Obviously, Rainey Shannon is a well-known name down there and across the state of Florida, to be frank. He was brought in with a couple other guys at corner in the secondary, a couple other younger guys that played a lot. I mean, he played a lot when he was a freshman, alongside guys like Justin Hodges and some of those other guys in that secondary. And Davonte, I don't remember when he made his first start or whatever, but he was, starting sooner than later for UCF, which, in the American Athletic Conference, I think it says a lot about young players that can get in there. And that's kind of the appeal of playing at a school like UCF. If you're a talented kid, it's not just a matter of, oh, you're going to see the field. It's probably you're going to, make an impact earlier than later at UCF. So, I think they really liked him out of high school. I thought it was a really nice addition when they added him. Of course, Rainey Shannon, finds guys like him in South Florida and recruits them to, wherever he is coaching, whether it be at Florida State now, I guess, or other schools in his past. But I think they were really happy at the time when they added him. And I remember when he, committed and talking with him, he seemed really excited to go to UCF. And I think, like I said, his sophomore year, he really took a step up. And I think this junior year they had high expectations for himself and from the fan base and maybe even from the coaching staff. And, just like, I don't want to criticize him. I don't want to say he was awful or anything like that. Like he still had a really solid season. I think he's going to do great things in Miami, no doubt.
Yeah, and he played over 700 snaps and was out there. And again, cornerback's just a tough spot to kind of
Yeah.
evaluate. And
Yeah.
again, I think you're, measuring upon expectations on what he did the year ago. Still upside, there's still there. There's still a lot to like with Davonte. You touched on it, just kind of being a little bit soft spoken. I'm curious, maybe your impressions of how his teammates kind of thought of him, and maybe leadership qualities or looked up to kind of guy. Anything like that? Any intangible things that you can offer, Jason?
Yeah, I think he definitely. I don't think he was directing traffic back there. You know, Obviously communication is big on defense, but he was always soft spoken when we talk with him, and I think his teammates liked him, and I will say this, like any kid, NIL was big to him. He was one of those guys making a nice chunk of change entering this season because of NIL and different sponsorships he had, and that was something that was, I suppose, important to him. So that kind of impacted, his relationship with some of the guys on the team and whatnot. But he was still a leader in that secondary, still a leader in that cornerback room that I think a lot of the guys realized that he has NFL potential. And so they looked up to him and asked him for advice and whatnot. But I always enjoyed talking to Davonte. I feel like maybe it was because he was soft spoken and whatnot. I think he was, wise for his age, almost like just an experienced guy that really, felt confident what he was talking about, I guess.
That's great, Jason. I appreciate you dropping the knowledge. A lot of information on Davonte for people that haven't seen him play and kind of seen his progress, if they do remember him from South Florida 3 years into his college career. So I'll let you get back to it. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.